Hey guys, tonight we slip into the velvet-draped salons of 18th century Paris, where the air smells faintly of rosewater, powdered wigs creak like tiny ships, and chocolate, not the kind you're used to, but a mysterious drink that might make you raise an eyebrow and wonder if you should give it a try, is on everyone's lips. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. You walk into a room bathed in golden light, your waistcoat a little too tight, and holding a steaming cup of chocolate. But this isn't your typical sweet milk chocolate. It's more like a bowl of spiced potion, one sip of which makes you pause. Spicy? And what's that strange herbal taste? Meanwhile, the old aristocrat beside you, with a smile that's a little too perfect, is explaining, "This is the latest recipe from Spanish monks. It'll help stimulate the senses, aid digestion, and purify the blood." Welcome to 18th century France, a time when people got high on chocolate. Back then, chocolate wasn't just a treat, it was an essential status symbol, especially among the royals and the aristocracy. Imagine this. Just drinking a cup of chocolate meant you had to bring in servants, silverware, special heaters, and the entire process was done in front of you, slow and elaborate. Historians even think chocolate was a public display of wealth, kind of like today's Hermes bags, showing off more than just a drink. At first, chocolate appeared in France as a drink. In the late 17th century, it was brought over from Spain, quickly taking over the court of Versailles. Legend has it that Louis XIV's mistresses secretly competed over whose chocolate recipe was the best, and this rivalry affected the entire sweet treat culture of Europe. Of course, the chocolate of that time wasn't as easily accessible as it is today. You needed connections, like an adventurous relative who happened to have a few overseas links, to get your hands on the precious cacao beans from the New World. And the price? Well, you'd need to work 3 months as a common citizen just to afford 1 cup of the drink held by the aristocracy. No wonder records show that common Parisians would stand outside coffee houses, observing others drinking chocolate, like how we today scroll through social media to see the rich and famous posting their latest purchases. But don't think chocolate was just a drink, it was also considered medicine. Yep, doctors would recommend a cup of chocolate to lift the spirits of high society women. Monks would secretly drink it during fasting, as it wasn't technically eating. There was even a belief that chocolate could cure constipation. Historians still argue about this. Did it really work, or was it just an excuse to drink more? Meanwhile, beside you, that aristocratic lady delicately lifts a lace handkerchief, sips her chocolate, and begins gossiping about whether so-and-so's chocolate had the newly imported cardamom powder. You're staring, dumbfounded, thinking, wait, making chocolate is like blending perfume. Behind all this chocolate frenzy, though, there's a shadow of colonial flavor. After all, the cacao beans and most of the spices came from the Americas, Asia, or Africa. This made the French elite even more enchanted by these ingredients, seeing them as both luxurious and mysterious. Kind of like the expression you're making now as you lie in bed, hearing this story, "Is this for real?" Historians still debate, did 18th century French people actually love chocolate, or did they just use it to flaunt their high tastes? Maybe it was a bit of both. Either way, tonight, you've just stepped into a world of glittering gold and aromatic spices, and we've only just begun to unveil the ingredients list of this mysterious hot drink. You're still sipping that strange, spicy chocolate, the one that doesn't quite taste like anything you've had before. You can't shake off the sensation of being part of something bigger. As you sit back and watch the aristocrats gossiping around you, one thing becomes crystal clear. This drink, this magical elixir, didn't just appear out of nowhere. It had to come from somewhere. Someone had to make it happen. So, let's rewind a bit and look at where the journey of chocolate began. The truth is, its story starts far away in a land you'd probably never expect, the tropical jungles of Central and South America. Cacao, the heart and soul of chocolate, is a gift from the ancient civilizations of the Americas. The Mayans and Aztecs were sipping it long before it made its way to European courts. And you're probably wondering, how exactly did this humble cacao bean make the long journey from the jungles to the tables of French nobles? Well, buckle up, because this isn't a straight path. First, let's talk about the cacao tree itself. Cacao beans, the precious cargo, grow in pods on the tree's trunk and branches. The Mayans and Aztecs had it down to a fine art. They made a bitter, frothy drink out of ground cacao, water, chili, and spices. And they loved it. They believed the gods had bestowed cacao upon them as a divine gift, and that drinking it gave them strength, wisdom, and, apparently, the ability to function without sleep. Who wouldn't want that? When the Spanish conquistadors, like Hernán Cortés, arrived in the Americas, they were handed this strange beverage and, of course, had to give it a try. Let's face it, if you were in their shoes, you'd probably be curious too. But Cortés, being the determined fellow that he was, wasn't just interested in the drink itself. He saw a chance to get his hands on a valuable resource. So, he smuggled cacao beans back to Spain, and that's where the game changed. For years, chocolate remained a closely guarded secret of the Spanish aristocracy. They tweaked the recipe, added sugar and vanilla to the bitter concoction, and began to refine it into something much closer to the drink we know today. Over the next century, the Spanish tried to keep their chocolate a secret, but like all good things, word got out. By the time it reached France in the late 1600s, chocolate had already undergone a transformation. It was no longer the bitter, spicy brew of the Aztecs. Now, it was sweetened and spiced to perfection, ready to dazzle the French court. And that's where you, sitting in that opulent salon, are now experiencing the result of centuries of trial, error, and, well, a fair bit of colonization. Historians still debate whether the Spanish were trying to keep chocolate under wraps on purpose, or if it was just a slow, organic spread of knowledge. Some believe they were afraid of losing their monopoly on the drink, while others think it simply took time for the word to spread across Europe. Either way, the journey of cacao beans from the jungles of the Americas to your cup was a long and complicated one, marked by cultural exchanges, trade, and the kind of adventurous exploration that makes history so damn interesting. And let's not forget, along the way, those humble cacao beans became more than just an ingredient. They became currency. The Aztecs used cacao beans as money, a commodity so valuable that they were traded like gold. When the Spanish got their hands on it, they saw it as a valuable resource, but it was the French, the Italians, and the English who turned it into a luxury item, an item of such high status that drinking it became a public affair. So, as you sit there, lost in the swirl of your chocolate drink, think about the incredible journey it made to get to this point. From the jungles of the Americas to the palaces of Europe, chocolate has been more than just a drink. It's been a symbol of power, wealth, and the interconnectedness of the world long before globalization became a buzzword. As the aristocrats around you continue their chatter, you can't help but wonder, how much longer will this mysterious drink remain a secret of the elite? It seems inevitable that, like so many other luxuries, it will eventually trickle down to the masses. But for now, in this lavish salon, you're experiencing it in all its exclusive glory. Historians still debate whether the Spanish were deliberately trying to keep chocolate secret, or if it was just a slow, organic spread across Europe. Some believe they wanted to monopolize it, while others think it simply took time for knowledge to travel. Whatever the case, the cacao beans have had quite the journey to reach your cup tonight. And then, of course, there's the chili. The French didn't just use chili for the heat, it was a symbol of boldness and power. The same chili peppers that had been part of the Aztec sacred drink were now embedded in the French aristocracy's most refined concoctions. Imagine drinking a cup of chocolate that was both velvety smooth and shockingly hot. That's the French take on chocolate, a little bit of luxury, a little bit of daring, a little spice, a lot of wow. Historians still argue whether the French made these spicy additions for medicinal reasons or simply for the thrill of novelty. Some say the spices were added for their supposed health benefits. Cinnamon was said to help with digestion, and nutmeg was considered to improve circulation. Others think it was just a way to make the drink even more exclusive. After all, how many commoners were drinking chili-infused chocolate in the 1700s? As you look around, you begin to notice something. The nobility around you aren't just drinking chocolate, they're savoring it. They take their time, letting the rich, spicy drink dance on their tongues. Each sip is a tiny moment of indulgence, a way to feel something, luxury, mystery, and a hint of danger. And there's something else you can't ignore. The spices are everywhere. It's not just the chocolate you're drinking. Spices are in the air, in the perfume of the courtiers, in the food they're eating, and even in the clothes they wear. Everything is an experience, a sensory overload meant to convey status, power, and wealth. Chocolate with spices wasn't just a drink, it was an experience. Historians still debate the reasons behind this flavor experiment. Was it about luxury, health, or just the joy of adding a little heat to an otherwise sweet drink? Either way, it was a trend that would define the French chocolate experience for centuries to come. And as you finish your cup of spiced chocolate, you can't help but feel like you've just taken part in a piece of history, a history full of rich, warm, and spicy indulgence. And then, of course, there's the chili. The French didn't just use chili for the heat, it was a symbol of boldness and power. The same chili peppers that had been part of the Aztec sacred drink were now embedded in the French aristocracy's most refined concoctions. Imagine drinking a cup of chocolate that was both velvety smooth and shockingly hot. That's the French take on chocolate, a little bit of luxury, a little bit of daring, a little spice, a lot of wow. Historians still argue whether the French made these spicy additions for medicinal reasons or simply for the thrill of novelty. Some say the spices were added for their supposed health benefits. Cinnamon was said to help with digestion, and nutmeg was considered to improve circulation. Others think it was just a way to make the drink even more exclusive. After all, how many commoners were drinking chili-infused chocolate in the 1700s? As you look around, you begin to notice something. The nobility around you aren't just drinking chocolate, they're savoring it. They take their time, letting the rich, spicy drink dance on their tongues. Each sip is a tiny moment of indulgence, a way to feel something, luxury, mystery, and a hint of danger. And there's something else you can't ignore. The spices are everywhere. It's not just the chocolate you're drinking. Spices are in the air, in the perfume of the courtiers, in the food they're eating, and even in the clothes they wear. Everything is an experience, a sensory overload meant to convey status, power, and wealth. Chocolate with spices wasn't just a drink, it was an experience. Historians still debate the reasons behind this flavor experiment. Was it about luxury, health, or just the joy of adding a little heat to an otherwise sweet drink? Either way, it was a trend that would define the French chocolate experience for centuries to come. And as you finish your cup of spiced chocolate, you can't help but feel like you've just taken part in a piece of history, a history full of rich, warm, and spicy indulgence. The secret, magic additives. Now, if you thought chocolate was just about cacao, sugar, and a few spices, think again. The French, being who they were, loved to experiment with all kinds of ingredients, and some of them were downright strange. But in those days, if something was exotic or unusual, it was usually viewed as mysterious, and if it was mysterious, it was probably also powerful. Who knew what a few obscure herbs could do, right? Enter the world of chocolate's magical additives. The French didn't just stop at cinnamon or chili pepper. They were also adding things like musk, amber, and even a bit of crushed diamonds. Yes, you read that right, diamonds. A sprinkle of crushed diamonds in your drink wasn't just for show. It was believed to purify the body and elevate your social status. Apparently, a little sparkle in your chocolate could elevate you from commoner to noble in one sip. Talk about a gilded touch. But before you start thinking this was all just for fancy garnish, let's talk about something more down to earth: herbs. You see, back in the 18th century, people were fascinated by the health benefits of everything they consumed, and chocolate was no exception. The French believed that adding certain herbs to their chocolate could make it a miracle drink. And they didn't just toss in a random bunch of herbs, they were very particular about which herbs made the cut. A popular addition was angelica, a plant that was thought to calm the nerves and cleanse the spirit. It was considered to be a powerful restorative and was often used in medicinal potions. Combine that with chocolate, and suddenly you had a drink that could both lift your mood and keep you calm. It was the perfect balance for someone constantly surrounded by the stress of court life. And let's not forget musk. Yes, the same musk that you might find in high-end perfumes today. Back then, it was considered to have aphrodisiacal properties, and it wasn't uncommon to find it in chocolate drinks meant to enhance one's romantic life. Imagine sipping a cup of chocolate that was infused with the scent of musk, a hint of vanilla, and a touch of angelica. The very idea sounds like something out of a historical romance novel, but it was a reality in the French courts. Musk was thought to make the drink more seductive, more alluring. No wonder the French were obsessed with it. Now, let's talk about amber. No, I'm not talking about the amber you might find in a jewelry store. This amber was a resin, harvested from trees and used in perfumes and cosmetics. It was prized for its sweet, woody scent, and the French, of course, found a way to incorporate it into their beloved chocolate. Amber was believed to have purifying and invigorating properties, so adding it to your chocolate wasn't just about taste, it was about wellness. The French were known to be quite obsessed with health back then, but it wasn't always about what we'd consider modern health. A little bit of amber in your chocolate? That was like adding a drop of liquid gold to your drink, a promise that it would leave you feeling refreshed, vital, and ready to face the challenges of court life. Now, you might be wondering, where did all these bizarre additives come from? The answer is simple: trade. The 18th century was a time of global exploration, and the French, always at the forefront of cultural exchange, had access to exotic ingredients from all over the world. Spices, herbs, perfumes, and resins, all these goods were flowing into France from the farthest corners of the earth. A sprinkle of musk, a dash of amber, or a bit of angelica wasn't just about flavor, it was about status. By adding these rare, expensive ingredients, the French were reinforcing their position at the top of the food chain, not just in terms of wealth, but in terms of culture and sophistication. And this wasn't just for the aristocrats, either. As much as the French elite loved their fancy chocolate, even the common folk were getting in on the trend, though not with the fancy add-ins, of course. But the obsession with chocolate was so strong that it trickled down to the masses. For a while, chocolate was a symbol of refinement and social distinction, but eventually, even the lower classes were finding ways to indulge in the luxurious drink, albeit with a simpler recipe. Historians still debate whether these magical ingredients were really considered to have healing properties or if they were simply a means to impress others. Some argue that these additives were about creating an experience, something more than just a drink, but a sensory journey that elevated the drinker's status. Others believe they were used for their supposed medicinal properties, intended to boost health, promote vitality, and perhaps even boost one's romantic life. But regardless of the reasons behind the additives, one thing is certain: the French knew how to make their chocolate stand out. And with ingredients like musk, amber, and angelica, they didn't just create a drink, they created an experience, one that was meant to tantalize the senses, elevate social standing, and leave a lasting impression. As you finish your cup, you can't help but marvel at the lengths the French went to in order to make their chocolate a magical, luxurious experience. It wasn't just about the cacao. It was about everything that went into it, everything that made it special. And now, as the evening winds down, you find yourself wondering, what's next? What other secrets could be hiding in the next sip of this rich, decadent drink? The aristocrat's chocolate rituals. As you sip the last of your decadent chocolate, there's an unmistakable shift in the air around you. The conversation turns to a topic that's more than just delicious, it's downright extravagant. The French nobility, as you'll soon discover, didn't just drink chocolate, they worshipped it. And this wasn't just about having a cup here or there. Oh no, this was about creating a ritual around it. Yes, the French had an entire, elaborate ceremony dedicated to drinking chocolate. And trust me, it's more dramatic than any modern-day coffee shop experience you've ever had. Imagine this: the grand dining halls of Versailles, the chandeliers glinting off the golden walls, and the nobility, decked out in their finest silks and velvets, gathered around an enormous table. The main event of the evening? A cup of rich, spiced chocolate, served with more ceremony than a royal marriage. It was more than just a drink. It was a performance. And you, my friend, are about to witness it all. You watch as one of the servants enters, holding a large silver pot, steam rising from the top. The nobility murmur in excitement as the servant carefully pours the hot chocolate into ornate cups, each one a masterpiece of delicate porcelain. But this is no ordinary chocolate. No, this is the kind of chocolate that has been prepared with such care and attention to detail that you can already tell. This isn't just something you drink, it's something you experience. The chocolate is poured slowly, with grace, and each noble takes their turn in sipping from their cup. But there's something else happening here, a delicate dance of small talk, flattery, and intrigue. The act of drinking chocolate has become more than just a means of indulgence, it's a social event. As each person takes their sip, they're not just satisfying their thirst. They're making a statement. They're reinforcing their place in the social order. Drinking chocolate is a way to show that you belong to the elite, those who have the time, the wealth, and the taste to indulge in such an affair. This was no accident. The French were masters at turning even the simplest of activities into something grand. The act of drinking chocolate was transformed into an elaborate ritual, a display of wealth, sophistication, and status. It was more than about enjoying a treat, it was about creating an experience that was both sensory and social. Now, you might be wondering, why go through all of this trouble just to drink some chocolate? The answer lies in something the French were very, very good at: social hierarchy. In a society where status was everything, the French aristocracy turned chocolate into a symbol of their elevated position. Drinking chocolate wasn't just a luxury, it was a performance. The more elaborate the preparation, the more powerful the statement. Historians still debate whether this obsession with chocolate drinking ceremonies was born out of a true love for the drink, or whether it was just a way to show off wealth and sophistication. Some argue that it was about creating a unique, ritualistic experience, one that set the aristocracy apart from the common folk. Others believe it was simply about keeping up appearances. After all, if you were seen drinking chocolate in the most elegant way possible, how could anyone question your status? But whatever the reason, the result was clear. Chocolate became the ultimate symbol of high society. As you sit back, taking in the spectacle, you realize something surprising. This isn't just about chocolate anymore. It's about showing off. The entire ritual is a way to display your opulence, your taste, your superiority. It's a game of power and prestige, all disguised as an innocent indulgence. As you continue to watch, you begin to notice the smaller details. The way the cups are held, the way the chocolate is stirred, the subtle nods of approval from the higher-ups in the room. It's all part of the dance, part of the performance. Drinking chocolate has become so much more than a simple pleasure. It's a way of life, a social ritual that ties the nobility together in a shared experience of luxury and exclusivity. Historians still argue whether these rituals were born purely out of the French love for chocolate or whether they were a calculated way to solidify social class distinctions. Some believe the chocolate ceremonies were about elevating the drink to a level of reverence, while others think it was more about creating an atmosphere of exclusivity and grandeur. Regardless, one thing is certain: these chocolate ceremonies became a symbol of the aristocracy's power, wealth, and cultural dominance. So, as the evening comes to an end and you finish the last of your chocolate, you can't help but feel a sense of awe. What began as a simple drink has transformed into a performance, a statement of wealth and power. You, too, have been swept up in the ritual, a part of the performance that is so carefully constructed, so steeped in tradition, that it feels as though you've participated in something much bigger than yourself. The French, with their love of luxury and spectacle, turned chocolate into more than just a drink. They turned it into an experience, one that was as much about power as it was about pleasure. And now, as you step away from the table, you can't help but wonder, what will the next ritual look like? The health myths of French chocolate. As you step away from the lavish chocolate ceremony, the warmth of the evening still lingers on. You feel like you've been part of something far greater than just drinking a sweet beverage. But as the conversation continues to flow, one thing becomes clear. The French were not just obsessed with chocolate for its taste or its status, it was believed to be a health elixir. Yes, that's right. Chocolate was seen as a miraculous drink, capable of boosting health, curing ailments, and even enhancing one's well-being. Imagine this: you're at a dinner party, but it's not just any dinner party. This is 18th century France, where the French elite are gathered around, discussing everything from fashion to philosophy, and, of course, the latest health trends. One of the hot topics of the evening? Chocolate. But not just for pleasure. No, in this world, chocolate was medicine. It wasn't just the rich who believed in the magical properties of chocolate. Even doctors were convinced. In fact, some medical experts of the time claimed that chocolate could cure a variety of ailments, from headaches to fatigue to poor digestion. It was even said to improve circulation, which, as you can imagine, was a pretty big deal back then. You see, in the 18th century, people were constantly looking for ways to improve their health, and chocolate was at the center of this quest. But why did the French believe chocolate could be so beneficial? Well, it all goes back to the ingredients. You've already learned about the cacao bean, which contains rich antioxidants and beneficial compounds. But on top of that, the French began to add other ingredients they believed had healing properties. Spices like cinnamon, nutmeg, and even pepper weren't just for flavor. They were considered medicinal, with various benefits for the body. For example, cinnamon was thought to help with digestion and improve blood circulation, while nutmeg was believed to have calming properties. And let's not forget the addition of herbs like angelica, which was known for its restorative qualities. Now, you might be thinking, sure, chocolate with spices might make me feel good, but does it really work? Historians still debate whether the French truly believed in the health benefits of chocolate, or if they were just riding the wave of popular trends. Some say that the aristocracy's belief in chocolate's health properties was more about appearances, an elaborate way to justify indulging in such a luxurious treat. Others argue that the health claims were taken quite seriously, with many people genuinely thinking that chocolate could cure what ailed them. For instance, one famous French doctor, François d'Orbanton, even published a book in the 18th century claiming that chocolate was an excellent remedy for most diseases. He went so far as to suggest that it could fortify the body and restore the spirit. You can just imagine the look on a French aristocrat's face as they took a sip of their rich, spiced chocolate, convinced they were sipping on something that would improve their health. This wasn't just dessert. It was medicine disguised as luxury. But of course, no health trend is complete without a little bit of controversy. While many were convinced of the miraculous effects of chocolate, there were those who were skeptical. Some medical professionals questioned the idea that chocolate could have any significant health benefits, pointing out that it was, after all, a sweet, calorie-dense drink. And there were also those who thought that the overindulgence in chocolate could actually be harmful. It was all too easy to get carried away, drinking it in excessive amounts, thinking it was doing wonders for your health. Interestingly, this belief in the health benefits of chocolate wasn't just limited to the French. Other European countries, like Spain and Italy, also believed in chocolate's medicinal powers. And it wasn't just a drink, it was used in many forms. There were chocolate pills, chocolate tinctures, and even chocolate-infused ointments. Imagine being slathered with chocolate cream as a remedy for your ailments. Sounds decadent, right? Historians still debate whether the French were simply deluded by the idea of chocolate as a health elixir, or if there was some truth to their claims. Some believe that the combination of cacao, sugar, and spices may have had mild benefits, such as a temporary mood boost or an energy lift. Others think the obsession with chocolate was more about status than health. After all, if something is both luxurious and good for you, it must be even more desirable. But whatever the truth was, one thing is certain. Chocolate was an integral part of French culture in the 18th century, not just as a treat, but as a symbol of health, wellness, and luxury. Whether it was really a miracle cure or just a clever marketing tool to indulge the elite, chocolate's place in French society was cemented. It was the ultimate feel-good drink, wrapped in a luxurious package that promised both pleasure and health. So, as you sit back and reflect on this strange chapter in chocolate history, you can't help but chuckle. The next time you take a sip of chocolate, just remember, you might be enjoying a bit of 18th century French wisdom, or perhaps just some delicious indulgence. Either way, you're partaking in a centuries-old tradition that's more complex than you might have ever realized. The invention and struggles of making chocolate. As the evening winds down and the last of the decadent chocolate is enjoyed, you can't help but reflect on the incredible journey you've been on tonight. You've gone from indulging in luxurious chocolate ceremonies to discovering its health benefits. But there's still one more chapter to this story. One filled with innovation, experimentation, and some rather quirky challenges. You see, the 18th century wasn't just a time of indulgence. It was also a period of transformation, particularly in the way chocolate was made. What you're about to learn might surprise you. Making chocolate back then wasn't as easy as it seems today. No, it was a messy, often frustrating process filled with bizarre experiments and a whole lot of trial and error. Picture this. You're in an 18th century French chocolate factory, if you can call it that, where the machines are nothing like the smooth, efficient ones we have today. Instead, you're surrounded by rudimentary equipment, probably a few overworked apprentices, and a lot of splattered chocolate. The process of turning cacao beans into the smooth, velvety drink that the aristocracy craved was a challenge, to say the least. The cacao had to be roasted, cracked open, and ground into a paste, by hand, of course. It wasn't just a simple grind and go. The paste had to be worked and worked again to release its oils, which is what gave chocolate its rich flavor. But that wasn't all. Once the paste was ready, the next step was to turn it into the drinkable beverage the French loved so much. This required another round of delicate, hands-on work. The chocolate had to be mixed with sugar, spices, and hot water, carefully, so as not to ruin the balance of flavors. And then, of course, there was the matter of heating it. But you couldn't just pop it on a stove, oh no. In fact, many chocolate makers had to use specially designed heating pots, often with the kind of complicated mechanisms that would make your modern-day slow cooker look like a child's toy. And that's not even the trickiest part. Getting the temperature just right was a science in itself. Too hot, and you'd burn the chocolate. Too cool, and you'd ruin the texture. But the real challenge came when it was time to make the chocolate smooth. For those in the business of chocolate making, smoothness was everything. If your chocolate wasn't perfectly smooth, it was considered inferior, unfit for the French court. So, chocolatiers had to find ways to process the chocolate until it reached that silky consistency. Some used a technique called conching, a method that involved working the chocolate paste for hours on end to get it just right. Conching was an exhausting process, and back then, it wasn't done with fancy machines like we have today. Oh no, this was all done by hand, with long hours of stirring and grinding, often under less than ideal conditions. Then there was the problem of storage. Chocolate was a luxury, and if you wanted to keep your stock fresh, you had to be meticulous about how it was stored. In those days, storage wasn't as simple as popping it in the fridge. No, it had to be kept in cool, dry places, often away from direct sunlight. Any change in temperature could ruin the delicate balance of flavors that had been so carefully crafted. And let's not forget that chocolate had to be shipped across the seas from the Americas, often taking months to arrive. By the time it reached the French factories, it was already in varying stages of freshness, so you can imagine how tricky it was to maintain the quality. Despite these challenges, the French chocolatiers were nothing if not inventive. They worked tirelessly to find new ways of processing chocolate, experimenting with different techniques and tools. And the results were nothing short of remarkable. Over the years, they refined the process, creating smoother, richer chocolate that was able to maintain its flavor and texture for longer periods of time. In fact, some of the methods they developed in the 18th century are still in use today. Historians still debate whether the French truly invented some of the most groundbreaking chocolate-making techniques, or if they simply borrowed from their European neighbors. Some believe that the French perfected the art of chocolate making, while others argue that it was a more collaborative effort, with techniques passing back and forth across borders. Whatever the case, one thing is clear. Chocolate making in the 18th century was an art form, requiring patience, precision, and a lot of trial and error. And let's not forget the quirky side of the chocolate-making process. There were all sorts of strange experiments and odd ideas circulating in the chocolate world. For example, some chocolatiers were convinced that adding wine or brandy to chocolate would enhance its flavor. Others experimented with adding herbs like lavender and rosemary, convinced that these would create a more exotic, sophisticated taste. The results? Well, let's just say that not every experiment was a success. But that didn't stop the French from pushing the boundaries and trying new things. After all, chocolate was more than just a drink, it was a passion. Historians still argue whether the 18th century French innovations were purely practical or if they were also about creating a product that would continue to elevate the status of the aristocracy. Some believe that the chocolate-making process was as much about maintaining control over the process as it was about improving the final product. The idea was to create a process that was so intricate and difficult that only the elite could afford the time, resources, and skill needed to perfect it. In a society where status was everything, the more complicated the process, the more valuable the chocolate became. So, as you sit back and think about all the hard work that went into making that perfect cup of chocolate, you can't help but marvel at the ingenuity of the French chocolatiers. Their passion for their craft led them to create a product that was not only delicious but also an emblem of their sophistication and status. And, as you take another sip of that smooth, velvety chocolate, you realize that you're not just enjoying a treat. You're partaking in a centuries-old tradition of experimentation, innovation, and, of course, indulgence. As you settle into your chair, the buzz of the evening starts to fade, and the smooth chocolate drink you've been savoring feels like it's just the beginning of a much bigger story. You've learned about the French passion for chocolate, the extravagant rituals, the health benefits, and the intricate process of making this drink of the elite. But now, there's something else that catches your attention. An interesting and often overlooked aspect of 18th century French chocolate culture, the divide between the rich and the poor. You see, for all the glamour and prestige associated with chocolate, it wasn't just a treat for the upper classes. Over time, the drink started to filter down to the lower levels of society, though not in the same grandiose manner you've witnessed in the royal salons. For the common folk, chocolate wasn't a status symbol, it was more of an accessible luxury, a little piece of indulgence in an otherwise difficult life. Now, imagine this. You're walking through a bustling Parisian market, surrounded by the smells of fresh bread, roasted meats, and the clatter of wooden carts. Amidst this vibrant scene, you stumble upon a small, humble chocolate shop. This isn't a grand salon with velvet chairs and crystal chandeliers. No, this is a modest little place where working-class Parisians can come to buy their daily dose of chocolate, albeit in a much simpler form than the elegant concoctions you've already witnessed. This is where the class divide becomes especially interesting. While the aristocrats were sipping their elaborately spiced, health-boosting chocolate concoctions in their gilded parlors, the working class was starting to experience the joy of chocolate too. But their version was much less refined, often a basic, unsweetened drink, or simply a block of solid chocolate that could be melted down at home. And, of course, it wasn't the rich, luxurious kind of chocolate the aristocrats consumed. But for the lower classes, it didn't matter. For them, chocolate was an exotic, luxurious treat that symbolized a rare indulgence, something to be savored during special occasions or as a small escape from the struggles of daily life. Interestingly, the way the working class used chocolate reflected the broader economic and social divides of 18th century France. While the elite drank their chocolate as part of grand social rituals and ceremonies, the poor viewed it as a treat of rare significance, something they could only afford on special occasions, like holidays or when they had a bit of extra money saved up. And while the aristocracy used chocolate to showcase their wealth and sophistication, the common people used it to celebrate, to mark moments of happiness or festivity. The meaning behind chocolate was different depending on which side of the social spectrum you were on, but it still played an important role in everyone's lives. But it wasn't just about affordability. The quality of chocolate consumed by the poor was also a factor in this divide. While the aristocrats were drinking their finely crafted, perfectly smooth chocolate drinks, the lower classes often had to make do with rougher, less processed versions. They didn't have access to the specialized equipment or the refined techniques that the chocolate makers at Versailles did. Instead, they had to make do with whatever they could afford, using basic tools and simpler methods. In this way, chocolate was a direct reflection of the social and economic inequalities of the time. As you think about the division between the wealthy and the working class, it's hard not to draw parallels with the modern world. Even today, chocolate can still be a symbol of status and luxury, often reserved for the elite. But just as in 18th century France, there's also a more accessible version for those who can't afford the finer things in life. Chocolate that's still considered a treat, but one that's available to anyone who can spare a few coins. The difference, however, is that now chocolate is more universally enjoyed, and it's no longer a luxury reserved for only a select few. In the 18th century, the French saw chocolate as a means of division and distinction. The wealthier you were, the more likely you were to enjoy the finest, most exotic chocolates. Meanwhile, the poorer folk were left to make do with simpler versions, creating a social barrier even when it came to something as seemingly simple as a cup of chocolate. But despite this divide, there's something beautiful in the way chocolate, in whatever form it took, became an integral part of both the elite and the commoner's life. For the aristocracy, it was a symbol of sophistication, of power, and of refined taste. For the working classes, it was a symbol of escape, of joy, and of a rare indulgence that brought a little sweetness to their often difficult lives. Historians still debate how much the divide in chocolate consumption reflected the larger social tensions in France at the time. Some believe it served as a reminder of the growing inequalities between the classes, while others argue that it was simply a reflection of the differences in lifestyle and resources. What's clear, however, is that chocolate became a marker of status in both directions. The elite used it to flaunt their wealth and cultural refinement, while the lower classes embraced it as a special luxury, even if it wasn't quite as fancy as the version enjoyed by the nobility. As you sit back and take in this complex history, you can't help but marvel at how something as simple as a cup of chocolate could play such a significant role in the social dynamics of a country. And as you take another sip of your own chocolate, you realize that you, too, are part of a much larger story. A story that has spanned centuries and continues to evolve, from royal courts to humble kitchens. Chocolate in the eye of the revolution. The conversation shifts yet again, and as you settle into the plush chair, a new chapter of this fascinating history unfolds before you. The sumptuous taste of chocolate still lingers on your tongue, but tonight, you're about to dive into a much more tumultuous era for France, the period when the storm clouds of revolution began to gather. Yes, it's time to talk about how the French Revolution affected chocolate. And no, it wasn't just about the fall of the monarchy and the rise of radical ideas. Believe it or not, even something as luxurious as chocolate was touched by the fiery winds of revolution. Imagine it now. You're in the heart of Paris, 1789. The streets are filled with the sounds of marching feet, shouts of liberty, and the general chaos of a country on the brink of massive change. The royal court is no longer as secure as it once was. The lavish feasts, the silk gowns, the gleaming gold of Versailles, all of it is beginning to feel like a distant memory. The monarchy's grip on power is weakening, and with it, the social and economic structures that supported the extravagant lifestyle of the aristocracy, including their beloved chocolate. Before the revolution, chocolate was undeniably the drink of the elite. As we've seen, it was reserved for the royal courts, nobles, and those with the wealth to indulge in such a luxury. But as the revolution took hold, so too did a shift in the way people viewed luxury, indulgence, and even food itself. The growing dissatisfaction with the excesses of the aristocracy led to a drastic change in the way chocolate was consumed and viewed. What was once a symbol of opulence and power became something far more complicated. As the revolutionaries stormed the Bastille and the monarchy crumbled, the wealthy no longer had the same access to the luxuries that once defined their social status. The lavish chocolate ceremonies and banquets were quickly replaced by a more austere way of life. In fact, many aristocrats found themselves exiled or imprisoned, their wealth and extravagant habits completely overthrown. The chocolate that had once graced their palaces was now a distant memory, a symbol of the old regime that was now being torn down piece by piece. But here's the twist. Despite the political upheaval, chocolate didn't disappear. It didn't fade away with the old world. Instead, it became a symbol of the struggle, the resilience, and the shifting power dynamics of the time. Revolutionaries, too, were consuming chocolate, though not in the grand fashion of their former aristocratic masters. Chocolate, while no longer associated with the high society, found a new life among the working classes. The once exclusive treat, which had been a mark of privilege, became something more accessible. It wasn't the same as the delicate, spiced chocolate served in Versailles, but it was still a form of indulgence, a little sweetness in a world of chaos. Interestingly, the new role of chocolate wasn't just about the physical drink itself. Chocolate became an important symbol in the ideological battle between the old regime and the new. While the aristocrats were being forced to live more modestly, chocolate, still somewhat rare and valuable, became a subtle sign of distinction, even among the revolutionaries. In some ways, it was still a symbol of wealth, but now it was democratized, signaling a different kind of sophistication. The working classes could now enjoy chocolate, but it wasn't just about the enjoyment. It was about reclaiming something that had once been reserved for the elite. However, as with all things during times of revolution, there were those who wanted to do away with the old entirely. Some revolutionaries took a hard stance against all things associated with the monarchy and the aristocracy, including chocolate. They viewed it as a symbol of everything that was wrong with the old order, an indulgence that was no longer appropriate in the brave new world they were trying to create. This faction pushed for a complete break from the past, wanting to replace the excesses of the monarchy with a simpler, more austere lifestyle. As a result, chocolate, once the drink of kings and queens, became something of a controversial symbol during this time. Historians still debate the role of chocolate in the French Revolution. Some argue that it became a symbol of the revolutionaries' resistance against the aristocracy, while others believe it was simply a casualty of the social upheaval. What is certain, however, is that chocolate remained a fixture in French society throughout the Revolution, adapting and evolving as it had done for centuries. And while it no longer held the same lavish status it once had, it continued to play a role in the lives of both the aristocracy and the common people, albeit in very different ways. As you reflect on this turbulent period, you realize that even in the midst of revolution, chocolate didn't lose its place in French society. It transformed, just as France was transforming. The aristocracy's favorite treat became something of a symbol of defiance, a way for the lower classes to claim a piece of the luxury once reserved for the rich. And in the end, that's what chocolate had always been, a symbol of indulgence, yes, but also a reflection of the larger social dynamics at play in France. As you finish your drink and watch the lights of the city flicker outside, you can't help but marvel at how something as simple as chocolate can evolve alongside the rise and fall of empires, the changing tides of social movements, and the struggle for equality. Tonight, you've not only learned about the delicious and luxurious side of chocolate, you've seen how it has weathered the storms of history and adapted to the ever-changing landscape of French society. Modern chocolate, legacy and change. As the days pass and the revolution fades into history, the dust settles and the world begins to rebuild. France is no longer the same, and neither is chocolate. In the years following the turmoil of the revolution, the story of chocolate takes a fascinating turn. The lavish indulgences of the past have been replaced with something more refined, something that echoes the changes France has undergone. And yet, chocolate continues to play a vital role in the lives of both the rich and the common people. Let's pause and reflect on this. How did chocolate move from being a luxury reserved for kings and queens to something that could be enjoyed by anyone? The answer, my friend, lies in the ingenuity and resilience of a society that, despite its upheavals, never fully let go of its love for this delicious drink. The French, after all, had a knack for reinventing traditions, even amidst revolution and change. They found ways to preserve the essence of what they loved about chocolate, while adapting it to fit into a new, rapidly evolving world. After the revolution, chocolate production took on a more industrial form. While it remained a symbol of luxury, it was no longer reserved for the aristocracy. As the world modernized, so did chocolate. New techniques were introduced, and chocolate started to be mass-produced, making it more affordable for the broader population. What had once been a drink enjoyed only by the elite was now available to all. The transformation of chocolate from a symbol of wealth and power to a universal pleasure is one of the most profound shifts in its history. But perhaps one of the most interesting aspects of this change is the way chocolate became woven into the fabric of everyday life. It was no longer just a drink at royal banquets or a cure for ailments. It became a comfort, a source of happiness, a treat to enjoy at any time. The French, with their long tradition of indulgence and refinement, had once again found a way to elevate the simple joys of life. And so, chocolate has continued to evolve. Over the centuries, it has spread across the globe, becoming one of the most beloved treats in the world. But its roots, its story, still lie in the rich history of France, the country where it transformed from an elite indulgence to a worldwide phenomenon. As we sit here tonight, sipping our chocolate, we can't help but reflect on how far it has come. From the ancient cacao beans of the Americas to the luxurious cups of the French court, from the radical days of the Revolution to its modern-day popularity, chocolate has remained a constant presence in our lives. It has seen empires rise and fall, revolutions change the course of history, and yet it endures. It is, in many ways, a reflection of the resilience of the human spirit, the ability to adapt, to reinvent, and to find joy in the simple pleasures, no matter the circumstances. So, As you finish the last of your drink and feel that familiar warmth spread through you, take a moment to appreciate the journey of chocolate. It has traveled a long way, through centuries of history, and brought with it a legacy of indulgence, luxury, and resilience. As you drift into a peaceful sleep tonight, remember that the story of chocolate is still unfolding, and who knows where it will go next. The night has fallen softly around you now. The world outside seems far away, as though wrapped in a warm, gentle embrace. You've been journeying through time tonight, stepping into the shoes of those who've come before us, tasting the richness of their history, and savoring the essence of a drink that has stood the test of time. Now, all that remains is the quiet hum of the night, the stillness of the world as it settles into slumber. You're not in a rush anymore. The rhythm of your breath has slowed, the warmth of the chocolate still lingering in your soul. You feel the gentle pull of rest, the weightlessness that comes with a day well spent. In this moment, there's nothing but peace, nothing but the soft embrace of sleep, drawing you in. So, as you close your eyes now, let yourself drift into the quiet comforts of the night. Let the story of chocolate linger like a sweet memory, a quiet comfort, as you rest. Sweet dreams, my friend. May you wake up refreshed and ready for the new day, knowing that chocolate's story will always be there, a little piece of history, always within reach. Good night.